Hello everybody! Welcome to today's Interceptor Researches, where we're going to be doing our series Religion in Final Fantasy, and starting with Final Fantasy 1. It's 1987. You want to design a new type of RPG. Enter Final Fantasy. Now it's not that new. I mean, in terms of being inspired a lot by D&D, and you get to choose your classes, and you don't really have any character development, but it's still really groundbreaking in a lot of ways. And the world is very complex, and you get to not just save the princess, which you start out doing, but actually go from there to save the world. I'm going to start with just an overview of, not the plot of the game, but the whole world. Because again, in this series, we're going to be trying to understand what the religion of the world is like. And accordingly, we need a view of the world, not necessarily just the story. So, at some point, the world was created. The world is kind of kept healthy and in balance with the crystals. There's 4, each one for a different element, and as long as the crystal had power, humans had kind of the security of that element. The earth crystal would make sure the harvests were good, and blah, 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 blah. One by one, monsters corrupt the crystals and steal their power. Tiamat takes the wind crystal and overthrows the Lufenian civilization. The Kraken corrupts the water crystal, the Lich takes over the earth, and Merilith the fire crystal. As the party defeats each monster, the crystals do get restored, and the world reaches balance, except for you also have to go back in time to kill someone to stop a time loop. We're not going to talk about that. So, the monsters that I just listed are liberally taken from Dungeons and Dragons and or various world cultures and religions. So, there's a lot of vague myth feeling, right? An amalgamation of myth and religious structures, but is there a coherent internal religion? Well, in my analysis, it's mostly myth and less religion in this one. And the religion, myth, whatever, would be the crystals. Now I'm going to go through and explain that and what that entails, but do make a note that we're going to see different versions of this in Final Fantasy 3 and Final Fantasy 5, which are the most like Final Fantasy 1 in structure and story. So pay attention to those videos when they come out in 2 and 4 weeks, and we'll kind of see some of the differences. Because in this game, you know, it starts off still relatively simple and straightforward and very pro-human, which is kind of unique for this game. And I'll explain what that means as we go. So, like I said, this is mostly the myth part of the religion and not the ritual part of the religion. So let me define this. So religion are the rituals and beliefs that creatures have about their gods. And it is different from mythology and philosophy, although religion contains both mythology and philosophy. Philosophy is a standard of beliefs that help you live your life a certain way, so religion definitely has that. And then also mythology, and I define mythology as culturally important stories, which is a very vague definition, but it captures a lot of things. And these culturally important stories do tend to involve gods, but they don't always. So that's just my definition of myth. And I can record a myth class for you so you know where I come up with that. But we'll worry about that later. I have a dog today, by the way. Hey, Nugget. Hey. Yeah. Alright. So, mythology are the culturally important stories. So again, part of religion, oftentimes, is the events, the things that happen between gods and men. But religion is not just that. Religion is more than that. So again, to take a really common example that a lot of people know, Greek mythology. So if all you knew about the Greek world was mythology, you would not really know anything about the religion. Right? The religion is very different from the mythology. And they have a very complex mythology that evolved to work out more philosophical ideas, more social ideas, and strayed ever more from the religion. At one point, of course, they were more united, but exactly how, we don't know. There's a lot of theories about kind of which came first, mythology or ritual, but we'll never really know. And on the converse, if you know things about Roman civilization, scholars argue that Roman society does not have mythology. Romans just took it all from the Greeks, and what the Romans have were just legends. But Romans certainly had a religion, whether or not they have a mythology. So they are connected, but not at all the same. By the way, I disagree with that scholarly statement. I think Romans do have mythology, because mythology are culturally important stories. So I don't necessarily differentiate between some of the legends and myth. Anyway, moving back to Final Fantasy 1. So, what do we have here? We certainly have creatures, right? There are lots of mortal races in this game. In fact, more races than most Final Fantasy games. There are elves, there are mermaids, there are humans, there are vampires. I don't really know where vampires fall on this mortal divide. Yeah, I don't know. But there's lots of creatures. Okay. Gods? Yeah, in a sense. The crystals are sort of the gods of this world. They have power over land. They bring humans prosperity when they're healthy, for lack of a better word. But they are subject to destruction, so they're not as powerful as you might expect or want gods to be. And certainly that doesn't work in favor of this religion. But then also there are no rituals between them that we can tell, so people know about the crystals, talk about the crystals, understand the crystals, but they don't, like, do anything for the crystals. They put them in temples. I guess they're supposed to protect them, which is like a ritual, but they're kind of bad at it, because these monsters just take over instead. So. But there is something going on. There is some sort of relationship between the creatures and the crystals, so that's good. That's good. And they certainly believe in the crystals and believe in the power and say prophecies about protecting them. And so this kind of relationship actually makes me feel, or kind of see this world as a Prelapsarian world, and that term means pre-fall. So most people are familiar with the story of Adam and Eve Eve eats the apple, Adam eats the apple, they both feel awkward, and God kicks them out of Eden. And that is the fall. But before that point, God walked among them. They enjoyed a very balanced, fruitful earth without really having to do anything for it. And that's kind of what this world was like before the crystals started being corrupted by monsters, right? They didn't really have to do anything for the crystals because the crystals were just giving them things and all was well. So it's almost a very human positive point that we're at. A kind of a religion before humanity needs to make up for what they've done, because it's not humans causing the trouble. We'll get to that in a moment. And as another example of that, we have the first civilization to fall. They build this crystal tower, which is almost like a Tower of Babel thing. But it wasn't their pride that caused the tower to be destroyed, it was Tiamat. And so it's like, oh, okay, so humans aren't doing anything wrong. And this is what we'll see becoming different in later games. Monsters in this game are the cause for the corruption of the crystals and not the sin of human civilization. And they even rely on human action to be fixed. And it kind of, on the one hand, it is still very Christian in the fact that, well, Catholic, in the fact that you have to do the good works and join in with God in order to make the world what it should be. But it also reminds me perhaps more of Zoroastrianism, where human action, I feel, is much more emphasized even than in Catholicism. Because Zoroastrianism, there is a war between good and evil, and humans are participating in this war and need to choose their side. The elements also remind me a lot of Zoroastrianism. I was reading up about it, and how water and fire are two of the elements. It's a very ecological religion because you try and keep the elements balanced. Something I'm not entirely sure, so if somebody's Zoroastrian, please correct me. But along these lines. And we do know that Final Fantasy takes a lot of inspiration from Zoroastrianism. There are lots of monsters that will be named after the gods, like Ahriman, the god of chaos. And the fact is that in Zoroastrianism, you are kind of fighting against chaos for the side of order, and that's a big thing in Final Fantasy. Whereas in Catholicism, it is order and chaos, but it's more God and sin. So that's where 10 will come in, dealing more explicitly with that. Whereas other games are more Zoroastrian, where you're fighting chaos explicitly. But this game does complicate that theory a bit, because Chaos is actually a human, Garland, who went back in time and created this time loop so he could be immortal. And so a human did cause the fall, but the rest of humanity doesn't really know what to do with that yet. So we haven't... We're kind of developing a religion in this world, and we're kind of just letting the heroes deal with it. But Garland's storyline is another important aspect of mythology and religion, that humans are mortal, and a lot of times in mythology, we will try a way to become immortal, or to become like God, eating the apple of good and evil, you know, trying to find the medicine that will make us immortal, etc., etc. And really all the attempts just are bad and just become bad. If you need to see the earliest example of that, go read Gilgamesh. It's an amazing epic. It's beautiful. And Gilgamesh tries to find this plant of immortality to save his best friend who has died. And he fails, and it's very sad. But it's an important thing for humans to come to terms with, that we are not immortal. We are mortal, and we have to do what we can with this time and not waste our energy in kind of foolish plans of trying to become like God, because we're not God. Right? We're humans. So we have to make sure we know where we are. So back to Final Fantasy I. It's in this ambiguous stage of being a religion. People do respect the crystals, want to protect and preserve them. So there is that reciprocal relationship of crystals giving a balanced, ordered world, and people putting them in temples and knowing that everything relies on them. But that's kind of the extent. And I will add as a final note, I haven't actually played Final Fantasy I by myself. I've watched Lissa's playthrough of it and read the Wikipedia, so I might be missing something, but I think I've got it all covered. So it's not quite a religion, but good. A good start for Final Fantasy. Because it's possible that there are the rituals and we're just not told about it. So the part of religion that we're missing in this game are the rituals, the kind of effect on daily life, right? Because you have to do things each day in a religion. So we're missing those elements. They might be there, and the game just doesn't go into that, but we don't know. So, and that's where we start in Final Fantasy. There's something. There's something. Do you have any other questions? Don't ask me about how the time loop works. Time travel is one of my 3 greatest fears. To me, it's a logical fallacy. This would be completely impossible, so I don't like it. But let me know if you have other questions or you need something clarified. So you've got like a good place to start. Again, a very human positive, but good place to start. And in Final Fantasy II, we'll start getting a little bit more, but still in this ambiguous way. And I'm not sure we'll ever get all the answers we want, because video games don't normally go into people's daily lives and how religion affects an individual. You know, it's just not a thing that Final Fantasy is exploring. But we will continue to see how it grows over the next few weeks. So comment below with any further questions. Comment below with any questions outside of it. And until then, Interceptor out. Sorry.